Malton, Ontario, the 29th of September, 1959. A machine that looks like nothing else in the history of aviation lifts off a concrete apron and immediately begins to fight. 12 seconds. Then the wheels come back down. On paper, this aircraft was rated for a service ceiling of 10,000 feet. In practice, it would never rise higher than 3. It is tempting to look at the Avrocar and assume nobody serious ever believed in it. That is not what the record shows. Bernard Lindenbaum of the Air Force Flight Dynamics Laboratory recalled a trip to Washington in the late 1950s. There he overheard an Army general remark that the Huey would be the last helicopter the Army would ever buy, because the helicopter was about to be replaced by the Avrocar. That was the expectation. Not a curiosity, not a stunt. A replacement for rotary flight itself. So the question is not why it failed. The question is what, precisely, stopped it at 3 feet off the ground. The Avrocar was 18 feet across, and almost everything inside it existed to move air. 3 Continental J-69 turbojets sat in the hull, but they were not there to push the aircraft anywhere. They were gas generators. Their exhaust was piped inward onto a 5-foot turbine wheel at the center of the disc, the turbo rotor built by Orenda engines with 124 hollow steel blades. That rotor drew air in through the top of the machine, forced it outward through ducts between the ribs, and expelled it from a nozzle running the full 360 degrees of the rim. The air was then supposed to cling to the curved upper surface and bend downward at the edge, the Coanda effect, dragging enormous volumes of surrounding air with it. Here is the part that matters. Weighed at Avro during the 1959 test program, the airframe came in at 4,285 pounds. The 3 engines, taken together, produced under 3,000 pounds of thrust. Even on the most generous figure in the record, the Avrocar could not lift itself with its engines. It never could. The entire design depended on multiplying the air. And near the ground, the multiplication worked. Sitting low over a flat surface, the escaping air was trapped underneath the machine. It filled the whole area beneath the hull and held it up on an even, stable cushion of pressure. That is the Avrocar you see in the footage. Steady, almost calm. Now watch what happens as it climbs. The air can no longer be held. The broad ring of pressure collapses inward into a single, narrow column beneath the center of the disc, a shape the chief designer John Frost called tree trunking. And between those two states, there is a boundary. In the program's own 1960 progress report, the engineers gave it a name, the critical height. At that boundary, the slightest tilt was enough. The air column would focus under the rising edge, while the falling edge lost its support entirely. That side would drop toward the ground, catch the cushion again, and be thrown back up, as the opposite edge lost support in turn. Back and forth, faster and faster. The engineers called it hubcapping because it looked exactly like a huscap spun across a hard floor. Fred Drinkwater, NASA's test pilot at Ames, described flying the thing as balancing on a beach ball. Out of ground effect, measured lift fell to 3,150 pounds, over 1,000 pounds less than the machine weighed. The Avrocar could only fly while the ground was helping it fly. What happened next is the part usually skipped. They did not give up. They fixed it, repeatedly, and every fix worked. 52 holes drilled into the underside to stabilize the cushion. That worked. It bought the first free flight in November 1959, and it did nothing above the critical height. The original spoilers were replaced with a focusing ring around the rim, because every control input had been costing the pilot altitude. That worked too. Hovering improved, and the machine became violently unstable above 30 knots. Transition doors were fitted to redirect the flow for forward flight. At NASA Ames, the modified airframe reached 100 knots in the wind tunnel and pitched its nose up uncontrollably. NASA bolted on a T-tail. It sat directly in the turbo rotor's exhaust, in fully turbulent air, and did nothing at all. 4 fixes, 4 successes, 4 new limits. The problem was never in any single component. It was in the shape. In March 1961, the money ran out. The Avrocar itself had consumed roughly $4.5 million in contracts. The figure usually quoted, $10 million, covers the entire disc program, running back to the Canadian studies of 1952. And no, this does not explain the flying saucer reports of the 1950s. The Avrocar could not leave a smooth concrete apron. It could not clear a garden fence. Frost's team knew the answer. They had already drawn it. Replace the 3 J69s with 2 General Electric J85s, roughly twice the thrust. Enlarge the turbo rotor from 5 feet to 6. Add a tail. More air. More margin. More authority above the critical height. They never found out whether it would have worked. Nobody paid for it. The program was canceled in December 1961, and the Army put its money into high-performance combat helicopters, into the Huey. The machine that was supposed to be the end of the helicopter was replaced by one. The Avrocar did not fail because it was absurd. It failed because it worked beautifully within 3 feet of the ground, and there was no way to build a war on that. My name is Lucas, and thank you for watching another episode of Redacted Arsenal. If you'd like to go deeper on this one, the full research brief is on the channel website, free to download, along with every other dossier in the library. The link is in the description, and if the channel is worth something to you, there's a Buy Me a Coffee link down there as well. It genuinely helps.